Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moffat coming at you again with another APUSH video focusing in on topic 4.11, taking a look at reform movements during the Antebellum era. Now previously we looked at the temperance movement, reforming prisons and help for the mentally ill, and education. Today we're going to take a look at another aspect of life during this time period, and this is going to be centered in on the lives of women during the Antebellum period. Now, we had mentioned previously that women are going to have an important role in some of these reform movements. We talked about the temperance movement. We talked about the impact of Dorothea Dix. We're going to be seeing more women going to get a public education and even some going on to college. So there is a sense to some degree that women are starting to get more opportunities than what we had seen traditionally and have more of a role in the public sphere in terms of, public policy and things like that. However, at the same time, there is certainly a sense amongst many Americans, especially men, that a woman is supposed to have a traditional role in the home. If you take a look at what this 1830s Massachusetts minister says, he says, "The power of a woman is her dependence. A woman who gives up that dependence on man to become a reformer yields the power God has given her for her protection, and her character becomes unnatural." So, this, kind of epitomizes the idea that a woman's role in society is to be dependent on men, be it their fathers, their husbands, their sons, whatever, and that a woman's place is not in the public sphere, but rather in the home. And this ideal is going to be promoted as the cult of domesticity. And it's going to be kind of sending this message that at a time where women are starting to have more of a public voice, there's a sense that no. Women are to be admired if they stay in the home. That a woman should be kind of put on a social pedestal if a woman takes on her, natural responsibilities of raising children and being the civilizing force of their family, promoting morals and virtue. And, to some degree, this stems back to Republican motherhood a generation earlier, that a woman is supposed to not just exist in this role, but, want to have this role. So there's this definite sense that, there's a rejection of this growing public voice of women. And note where women are in terms of rights and opportunities in the early 19th century. Women do not have the right to vote yet. Just straight up, women don't have the right to vote. Women in many states are going to be basically seen as having the same legal status as a minor, like a child. So what does that mean? Well, in many cases, it limits the ability to have any kind of financial independence, to be able to file lawsuits, limits abilities regarding getting a divorce, stuff like that. And speaking of things, dealing with financials, even though, most states allowed a single woman to be able to own property in her own right, these same states generally would stipulate that if a woman is married, that she is not able to own property in her own right, but rather must be under the name of her husband. So there's this general sense that as a woman, you need to have a man in your life. And when you do have that man in your life, that man takes responsibility over every aspect of your life, that you really don't have a life of your own. It is within, the realm of what your husband dictates your role in life is to be. And, if you have, very limited opportunities to get a divorce, if you have limited opportunities to be able to have any kind of independent wealth or things like that, it really is a self-fulfilling prophecy that a woman is going to be dependent on a man, because men are making laws and have made laws from time immemorial to make women dependent on men. Now, understand that even though most men seem to be very comfortable with this relationship, and many women are resigned to this status in life as well, there's also going to be more and more women that are going to be defining the cult of domesticity as being a form of slavery unto itself. And, as the Second Great Awakening is, kind of, galvanizing people to, get more religiously active, and as Transcendentalism is sending more of a message of equality amongst all Americans, there's going to be more of a sense by certain women, kind of on the, on the more, liberal side of things, that women should and must have a stronger voice in society and not just accept this idea of being praised for being, the domestic woman. Because for many women, that's not anything to be, put on a pedestal for. It's limiting their desires of what they want to achieve in life in terms of having a political voice, having a voice in terms of reform, or whatever. Note that, women want to be involved in all sorts of areas of reform, up to and including the growing abolitionist movement, even though many men in the abolitionist movement are not going to be very accepting of this. Many men are going to be concerned that if women start to have more of a voice in the public sphere, if they're starting to have more influence in reform movements, well, then that's going to snowball into other things. That's next going to mean that women are going to want to have voting rights, and that women are going to be running for office, and then women are going to be, demanding equality in the workplace, and are going to start to actually work jobs that may be paying more than what their husband would be making, and having male employees and things like that. And for many men that are going to be fearful of these potential changes, they kind of envision an eventuality where women will be the dominant gender, and that men will be relegated to a domestic role, as this cartoon kind of shows here, that it'll be a woman that makes the decisions and earns the money and has the political voice, and men will be, basically marginalized in society, which I find to be pretty telling. If men are fearful of swapping roles in society with women, that kind of speaks to a level of understanding to men understanding what has been done to women in society in terms of being marginalized. But despite, many men in society being opposed to women having more of a voice in society, it's still not going to stop the meeting that is going to be taking place in Seneca Falls, New York, in 1848. That is going to be for the purpose of promoting women's rights. And this really will be a historic occasion when we see Elizabeth Cady Stanton and many other leading female reformers getting together to basically, assert their natural ability, their natural right to be free, independent, and equal in society. And in many respects, it's the same sort of passion and anger and resentment that was echoed by American colonists, particularly the founding fathers, when they felt that their rights had been, limited and violated for a long, long time. And when those founding fathers decided that they were going to assert their rights by the Declaration of Independence, well, guess what? The Seneca Falls Convention is going to follow that same lead and assert the rights of women to be equal in society with a document known as the Declaration of Sentiments. So if we take a look at the Declaration of Sentiments, hopefully you will notice that it sounds very similar to the Declaration of Independence in terms of how it's organized and a lot of the language that is being used. In many respects, it's using enlightened philosophy that's going to justify the American Revolution in terms of the ideas of inherent rights for men that were being violated by a tyrannical government in Britain, and is now applying it here domestically with the issue of women's rights being violated by men traditionally. Take a look at one of the more famous lines of this document and how it is a play on a famous line of the Declaration of Independence, where in the Declaration of Independence it says that we hold these truths to be evident, self-evident, that all men are created equal. Take a look at the Declaration of Sentiments. It says that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal. A very powerful statement, even though it's just a slight tweak to the language from the Declaration of Independence. It speaks volumes. It's very boldly saying that if men have natural rights, women also have natural rights. And just like the Declaration of Independence is going to say that, the colonial government had been tyrannizing them, and here's all these specific examples of how the British government had tyrannized them. Well, guess what? The Declaration of Sentiments is going to do the same thing, except it's not about colonial governments far away tyrannizing women. It's about how men historically have tyrannized women. And, take a look at some of these examples here. The idea that, men have never allowed women the right to the elective franchise. That means the right to vote. The idea being that, how about this? The idea that women are asserting that men have denied women rights that they would give to the most ignorant and degraded of men, both natives and foreigners. It's very interesting that, you've got these, in some cases, wealthy and educated women saying, well, hey, I'm wealthy, I'm educated, but you're letting the poorest, common man be able to have the right to vote, but not me, someone that might be illiterate, being able to vote, and being able to vote just because he's a man, as opposed to me, who is educated and refined. And note, there are also many of these women's reformers are not going to be afraid to, inject race into the issue as well. The idea being is that, in some areas of life, some areas of American society in the North, black men did have limited suffrage rights at the time. And some of these women saying, well, if a black man can have some degree of suffrage rights, well, why couldn't a white woman be able to do that? So note, women in this era are not going to, especially Elizabeth Cady Stanton, not going to be afraid to kind of inject some level of racism, unfortunately, as part of, creating their rationale. The idea being, once again, as you look through here, that, men have made women, if married in the law, civilly dead. In other words, you don't have any real legal rights, particularly if you're a woman. That, men have taken away the right to property and the money that they earn. They have created divorce laws that basically deny women equality, and so on and so forth. Deny women the right to an education, etc., etc. So, the Declaration of Sentiments is going to be a very loud shot across the bow, so to speak, in terms of demanding women's rights. But as we kind of alluded to just a moment ago, there's also going to be issues in terms of gender and race that we have to be mindful of, and that's where we have to focus in on the words of Sojourner Truth right here. Sojourner Truth, a former slave, by the time we get to the antebellum era, is going to be a leading voice for not just feminism, but also equality rights for African Americans. And her speech in Akron in 1851 is going to be very well known as entitled "Ain't I a Woman?" And if you take a look here, if you read it, it says, "That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I've plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as a man when I could get it, and bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, and seen most of them sold off to slavery, and when I cried out with my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman?" And so there's this idea that, women are being denied equality, but especially women of color. The idea being is that, she's making a point that, being black, being African American, does that take away from her sense of being a woman? So Sojourner Truth is pointing out, dual areas of discrimination that women of color like her are going to be facing. So understand there's going to be some very important themes affecting women in antebellum society. But for now, we will leave it right there. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.